why should I make myself an expert when I can pick up the phone and call an expert? And why should I become an expert in sexual assault or public health or public safety or security forces or personnel? I've got experts. Pick up the phone. You will be known as a leader for how well you handle not the normal times, but the crisis time. And it is so incumbent upon us as leaders to exercise and red team and tabletop and prepare so that when the crisis comes, because it will, that you will be ready practically and emotionally to lead your team in the midst of a situation that could be very difficult. And fortunately, could have turned out a lot worse than it did on that day in Clinton, Maryland. The higher you get up into a leadership position, especially in crisis management, maybe at any point, that it behooves you to realize that you've got experts that are all around you. Don't pretend to be an expert. Absolutely. In fact, don't spend the time trying to be an expert in everything. One, because you can't be, but two, it steals the initiative of the people who are around you. And I think if you're sitting at a table, then you have experts in their areas all around you. Tap into their expertise.
Welcome to Unbreakable Leadership, no-nonsense podcast for leaders who want real-world lessons. I'm Peter Pollock, and with over 30 years of military and corporate leadership, I'm here to share struggles, successes, and practical advice that actually works. We'll look at real leadership stories that matter, focusing on attention, integrity, and growth through failure. Let's get started. Hey folks, how you doing out there? It's Peter Pollock again. Real leadership stories. We're talking with Brigadier General retired John Teichert this morning. Sir, would you go ahead and, thanks for joining me first of all. Second of all, would you go ahead and introduce yourself, please? I'd like the audience to know who you are.
Absolutely. And Peter, thanks for having me. Congratulations on standing up this awesome podcast.
Thank you.
We have a mutual friend in Lurch Afflebaugh, and I'm glad that he linked us up a couple of years ago.
He did.
I am John Teichert. My call sign is Dragon. I served in the United States Air Force for 28 years. I was an F-15E fighter pilot. I was an F-22 test pilot. And my last 4 assignments, I was the commander of Joint Base Andrews, the President's Airfield outside of Washington, D.C. I was the commander of Edwards Air Force Base, what I call the center of the aerospace testing universe, our primary test base in the Mojave Desert in Southern California. I was our nation's senior defense official to Iraq. And then I ended my career in the Pentagon leading international affairs for the Air Force and the Space Force. I've been retired for 3 years now. I do a lot of keynote speaking. I do a lot of writing. I do a lot of media engagements on Fox News, News Nation, and places like that, and a little bit of consulting. And I'm having fun in this phase of life. I hope like you are as well, Peter.
Thanks for the introduction, sir. I'll tell you a little bit of background about me and how we actually got in touch with each other. Peter Pollock grew up in Australia, 24 years in the Air Force, joined from the University of Hawaii. Wait, we have to talk about the University of Hawaii, first of all. Okay, so I read your bio just before I came on, and MIT, Stanford, DGDG, SAS grad. Oh my God, you have to speak slowly to me. I'm a University of Hawaii PE teacher. So they call it kinesiology these days, but actually I'm a gym teacher. So if I didn't go in the Air Force, sir, I would be a gym teacher. So let's slow it down, use small words, 2 syllables, and we're good to go. You good with that, boss?
Well, you know what? I think it's impossible for me to talk slowly, Peter. That's a problem. I'm loud and I'm fast, and you've got to listen fast, but I'll try to talk in small words. But you're a smart guy. I know that to be true. And by the way, I came from a logging community in Northwest Washington State. They needed a logging guy community in my class at MIT, so they let me in, and somehow I made it through.
That's awesome. That's awesome. In fact, you know, it's funny. I have an article when I first was in command in 2007 to 2009 at Largest. I actually wrote, people skills may be more important than book skills. So we're good. I think we're on the same level here. But let's go ahead and I sent you a few topics to talk about. And you mentioned you wanted to swap some stories about CAT, Crisis Action Team, for all those people who don't understand. And if you don't mind, I want to go out with the first one that I did in 2010. I was the MSG deputy commander, and you would appreciate this. We had an F-16 coming in, a Viper, and I know you've probably flown that kind of plane. I mean, you flew like 30 plus different types of planes, but we had a Viper coming in and got hot brakes on the runway, and it was like 4:15 in the afternoon on a Friday, and of course, there's no weekends when you're deployed, right? But just the psychological fact that it was a Friday afternoon, it was late on a Friday afternoon. So it came in, got hot brakes, which for all those people who don't know, it basically, brakes wouldn't work, tires went flat, everything. So it started rolling. It rolled through an active minefield. The guy didn't punch out, right? So he was still in the in the aircraft. He rolled through and it landed half outside the fence, half in the fence, right? So it went through some HESCO barriers and stuff like that. So they stood up the CAT team. Okay. Of course, I am a personnel guy. I don't know much about planes, but I know that I had to stand up the crisis action team. In fact, General Brig that we just talked about, he was the wing commander at the time, and he went up to the higher level with all the group commanders, and I was running the CAT. So the crisis action team, our job was to figure out, we had this F-16 that was resting outside the wire, had jet fuel on it, had live weapons on it, and it was, we thought it was cracked in the fuselage and the pilot was still in it, right? The funny thing is, I don't know if you know a guy named Chris Pike. He was the F-16. He was the group commander over there at Bagram. He was actually driving around the flight line, true story, driving around the flight line, and he saw this plane go across the road right in front of him outside the wire. He stopped and picked up his pilot. Can you imagine like a young captain or a lieutenant who's flying the plane? he just crashed his plane. He gets out of it, and his group commander is waiting for him, and he picks him up. So bottom line is, I was a personnel guy in charge of this crisis action team, and around the table were U.S. Army, U.S. Air Force, and Koreans, because we were there joint with the Koreans. And literally, sir, when I tell you we were speaking 3 different languages, we were literally speaking 3 different languages, right? Air Force is different from Army, obviously is different from Koreans. Of course, they spoke English, but it was really funny. Long story short, 24 hours later, we get this thing off and back. We had like multiple levels of air power up, air cover up. We had people outside the wire guarding, so nobody could steal anything and stuff like that. But the biggest compliment I got at the end of that, I was a personnel guy. When you're in charge, and it goes back to the point, when you're in charge, you don't have to be the smartest person in the room. In fact, it behooves you not to be the smartest person in the room, so you listen to all the SMEs. And the point of the story is this 06, he was the deputy OG, he was an 06. He was sitting in the CAT with me, and he was the flight suit guy. He wasn't a 16 guy. He was actually a strike eagle guy. He comes up to me afterwards when we finally got it done, and he gave me the greatest compliment ever. He said, "Thanks for not pretending you know everything." Mm-hmm. And I'm like, "What?" I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "You are the first non-flyer guy, the first support guy that I've ever worked with in a CAT that didn't pretend he knew everything." That to me, sir, was the greatest compliment that I've ever received, because, well, number one, I didn't know anything about the plane. But the point is, as a leader, you don't have to be the smartest person in the room. In fact, Steve Jobs said, if you're the smartest person in the room and you're at the head of the table, find another table. Do you have anything similar to that? Do you want to talk about that? Being the smartest person in the room, or being, as a leader, you got to listen to people. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, no, Peter, great story. And, to have a pilot come up to you, a fighter pilot, and say that is a dose of humility on his part. Hopefully he follows that same lesson in his own life.
Yep.
But you're right, that's a great compliment. And it's also true that the higher you get up into a leadership position, especially in crisis management, maybe at any point, that it behooves you to realize that you've got experts that are all around you. Yeah. Don't pretend to be an expert. Absolutely. In fact, don't spend the time trying to be an expert in everything. 1, because you can't be, but 2, it steals the initiative of the people who are around you. Yeah. And I think if you're sitting at a table, then you have experts in their areas all around you. Tap into their expertise. Yeah. And, one of the first things that I like to ask when someone comes to me with a problem is, what do you recommend? What do you recommend? You're the expert in this area. And then
That's a
they'll
great
recommend
question.
something. I'll ask them to tell me a little bit why. What are the downsides? What are the upsides? What are the risks? How are we mitigating risks?
Mhm.
But they're the expert. And as a leader, 90 to 95% of the time, I would say, all right, that sounds great. Execute, keep me updated.
Yep.
And we are wise and will be far more effective as leaders when we realize that we've got experts all around us. We're not blindly following their recommendations. We're not shifting responsibility. The authority and the responsibility remains with me.
Mhm.
But if you're an expert and you see a problem and you've got an idea, then I'm likely going to tell you, press on with your idea and keep me updated. And that allows you to retain the initiative and allows you to exercise your expertise in a way that I never could.
Yeah, I mean, that's fantastic. You just showed me my book before we started talking, but in my book, I have a saying that says, "Thank you, everybody. Peter Pollock, Leadership: The Good, Bad, and Ugly. Go and buy it. It's on Amazon right now. It'll get to you next day if you have Prime." Anyway, but I say in my book, and I want your feedback on this statement. I said, "Your job as a leader is to not to know everything about everything. Your job as a leader is to know a little about a lot." The job for the people around the table, the SMEs, is to know a lot about a little. What do you think of that, sir?
No, so an example I give that's exactly aligned with that, Peter,
Yep.
is that when you and I went to go be a squadron commander,
Mhm.
before we became a squadron commander, we went to a squadron commander course.
Yep.
And I remember going to that course, and you spend a week or two learning about some details and a variety of things that you never paid attention to before you were a squadron commander.
Mm.
But the example I give is that I remember a military justice course.
Yep.
And they had some JAG come in and talk to us about military justice. And they left a book that was about 3 inches thick for each of us called The Military Commander in the Law.
Yep, yep,
And
yep.
I make a big point that
I've
I
still got that.
never have opened that book because
Mm.
why should I make myself an expert
Yeah.
when I can
No,
pick up
that's
the
wow.
phone and call an expert?
That's brilliant.
And why should I become an expert in
Yeah,
sexual assault or public health
yep,
or public safety or security forces or personnel? I've
yep,
got experts. Pick up
yep,
the phone,
yep.
know a little bit to understand what are they telling you and does
Mm,
it make
mm,
general sense?
mm.
By the way, hire the right people so you can trust
Oh,
them
yeah,
when they come with
good point.
answers to you. But I just think that reading through 3 inches of military justice and the law
Yeah,
actually takes away from my ability to have wisdom and humility to
yeah,
reach out to the experts to help me understand
it's
what
fantastic.
situation I'm in and what should I do based on that situation and why.
Yeah, wow, that is fantastic. I still have that book somewhere. Uh, I'm sure it's in one of my boxes here in my garage. I want to take a little bit of sideway because you showed my book, I read your book, and we actually had a really good conversation about this, whether it be over email. But this is your book, Boom, by John Teichert. It's a great book. There was something in there that I actually went back to you and I didn't challenge you, but I looked at the phrase differently, right? You wrote this and a lot of what you wrote about innovation and stuff like that, sir, if you remember, obviously you do, you wrote the damn book, um, was about putting teams together and innovating so we can beat the enemy. Test squadron, tests, we're all about getting better than the enemy, being always a step ahead of the enemy. And you wrote something that I absolutely vehemently disagreed with until we spoke about it or until I read it in your book. You said, uh, so I say, never tell me just get to yes. I hate that. But in your book, you actually said, get to yes, because, and then you clarified it. If we don't get to yes, the enemy will win. In your world, 100% correct. I went back to you and I said, no, I hate that because I'm a personalist. Sometimes we cannot get to yes. So I absolutely despise a boss that says, just get to yes. Uh, Actually, we can. It's illegal if we get to yes, you know? What are your thoughts about that? I thought it was a brilliant conversation we had. Go on, sir.
No, I think so too, Peter. And there's obviously a little bit of nuance there. One of my favorite slogans, you can't see it, but there's an 18-inch by 18-inch plaque over my left shoulder on top of my bookshelf
Mhm.
that says the phrase, find out where no lives and kill it. N-O, no, with an
Wow.
exclamation point. Find out where no lives and kill it.
I love
And I
that.
agree with you. We can't always get to yes, but the nuance there is that we can always listen to someone's idea.
Mm,
We can always consider it,
mm.
and then we can get to yes when
Yep,
or if appropriate.
yep.
But I don't think our people who come to us with ideas, and they've got great ideas out there, that you
Mhm.
want to unshackle and unleash the
Yep.
ideas from your team. But I think the best thing that you can do is listen and consider,
Mm.
and then get to yes if it's possible, if it's a good idea and it meets
Yep,
all the metrics.
yep.
Or maybe there's a position that falls slightly short of their recommendation where you can get to a partial yes.
Mm.
Or even if you have to say no, which I don't like no, but
Yep.
sometimes no is the right answer,
Sometimes it
ex-
is.
explain your no. Explain
Yeah.
why you are
Why is it
saying
no?
no
Yep.
and why it isn't the
I
right
love that.
answer for this time.
No,
And
no,
I
no, I
think
love
people
that.
want to be listened to and considered. And then maybe you can get to yes, but they certainly want you to communicate and have that feedback loop back to them
Yeah.
so they know you listened and considered it. And now they're smarter because you've explained if you have to get to know why.
Yeah, yeah. No, no, that's brilliant. Thanks for that caveat. And I love that thing, that plaque behind you. It says "Find, know, and kill it." Yeah,
Yep.
'cause
But there's also a nuance also here, Peter, that I think sometimes people get to know because they see that it's not possible based on a regulation or
sure,
even law.
sure.
But the thing that comes with that statement of trying to get to yes is that everything in life is waiverable, or almost everything. There are very few things that are
That's a very good point.
penciled on stone tablets by the finger of God.
Yep.
Those you should follow.
Yeah, the
But
10 Commandments?
everything
Yeah.
else, yeah, everything else, a law can be changed, a regulation can be waived. If you've got a good reason to do so, then don't just say no because the regulation says
Yep.
so.
Yep.
Say no because the regulation says so, and here's why
Tell
it
me
makes
why.
sense to say no.
100%.
But otherwise, if what the person is asking for and it makes sense,
Mm.
then there's always a waiver authority. And don't be hesitant to explore the waiver authority to try to get to yes if there is a good idea, even though it is against a regulation or even though it means you've got to change federal law.
So many ways we can go with this conversation. J Last thing about yes, about no, actually. The last thing I'll say about no. So in my leadership class, I actually teach, based on the just get to yes thing. No is never the first answer, because what happens, and you're a smart guy, you'll know the answer to this. What happens if you ask me a question and the first thing I say is no, other than getting pissed off, what's gonna happen to the conversation, sir?
No one's going to ever offer ideas again.
Correct, and it's
Yep.
gonna stop it. You're gonna go, "Okay," and walk away, right? If I go up to you and say, "Hey, can I do this?" "Nope." "Okay, let me go find out someone who can tell me yes," right?
Uh huh.
So, no to me shuts down a conversation. It just shuts it down. You're done after that. No may be the right answer, but it's never the first answer. Would you agree with that simple statement right
I
there?
do. And I think it's important because as a leader,
Mm,
not only are you making decisions on that particular situation,
mm,
but you're also creating culture and precedent
mm.
because the word gets out in your organization or your team about how you handle input or feedback.
Mm.
And if early on in your tenure, people realize that no matter how good their idea may be,
Yeah,
that you're just going to say no because you're inclined to say no,
that's
then
your
it's going to
tendency. Yeah.
stop all of the flood of good ideas from
Yep.
ever getting to you.
Yeah, and people are
One
gonna
of the
stop
things,
coming to you.
Peter, yeah, one of the things I do actually on day one, every leadership job that I start, is I give my leadership philosophy to my direct reports.
Mhm.
But then I ask them to do this thing that I call the note card drill, which is before you leave this room, I want you to write on a note card. You can do it anonymously. You can put your name. I don't care. Something that I can immediately do in my position
Wow.
now to
Okay.
make your life better, your team's life better, or your mission more successful.
Wow.
Immediately, I do that, and I don't let them leave the room until they've written one thing down on a note card. And then in the next week, I get to yes as quickly as possible on those things they have
Yeah.
given me, and I
Yeah.
advertise that.
Wow.
Some of them I can't get to yes on, and then I explain myself. But it starts a precedent-setting event, a culture-setting event,
Yeah. Wow.
where people realize that you're actually asking for feedback and you're taking action on their ideas, and the word gets out throughout the organization. And the thing, Peter, that I find interesting about
Yeah.
that note card drill is almost all of the things people put down are either asking me to delegate authority
Mm.
or asking me to waive a rule that's getting in the
Yeah.
way.
It's getting
And
in.
when you say
Wow.
yes to either of those two things, it's infinite return on investment because it doesn't cost you anything to delegate
Yeah. No, it does.
authority
Wow.
or to waive a rule, but you
Yeah.
get effectiveness out of it. So now it's effectiveness divided by zero cost, which is
That's
an
amazing.
infinite return on investment.
That Okay, I'm gonna write another chapter for my next book now about that. That it's phenomenal. The note card drill. I don't So, yes, as leaders, we always have a start off. This is my leadership philosophy. These are the good things. These are bad things. Don't do this. Do this. Right. One of the things is I drink coffee in the morning. So if you ever want a good decision, come to me in the morning. In the afternoon, I'm probably half asleep. So if you want me to prove anything, come to me in the morning. But while you were saying that, I don't do that note card drill. That is brilliant. And it sets a tone. It immediately sets a mindset. That's great. But what I do instead of that, is I have quarterly. I think actually at my last command it was bi-monthly. Every other month, luncheons with the airmen, the NCOs, the senior NCOs, the CGOs, and the FGOs, and they're all separate. And I'm like, okay, talk to me. It's really, and I just we have lunch, we talk story, and then I ask them, "What can I do for you? What
Yep.
is holding you back? What can I clear?" Much like your note card drill, right? Now, 90% is a bit higher. Probably about 70% of what I hear is just whining and stuff that I can't do anything about. It's just the druthers of being in the military, right? Why do we have to do? Well, you have to do that because your boss wants you to do that, and that's fairly. I can't do anything about that. But about 10 to 15, 20% of the time, you get some real good ideas out of those luncheons, and you're like, "You know what? I can actually do something about that." Or if they ask me a valid reason why something and I explain it, then it opens their eyes too. But if they give me something that I can do, sir, and I actually go and do it, my level to them has just gone exponentially through the roof,
Yep.
and they will keep bringing me stuff that I can help with. So I love to help people. I absolutely love to help people whenever I can. So I believe leadership's all about connection. You probably know
No,
that.
I totally agree with that. And I love the idea of what you do.
Mm.
And really, when you start asking those questions of, hey, what are we doing wrong? What can I do to help you? What am I jacking up? Whatever you
Yep.
do, however you
Yep.
say it. And then they start to realize, like you said, that you're actually really asking for their feedback.
Yeah.
It's not
No.
just
Yeah.
performative.
Yep.
This isn't just a joke or a facade.
Yep.
And the way you prove that is getting after and actioning some of the ideas that people have
100%.
brought to you, and then
100%.
communicating that you've done so. The word's going to get out.
Yep.
They're going to start to talk amongst their friends and their colleagues and in their cubicle farms about, hey, the boss asked me, what can I do different around here? I gave him an idea and he actually did it. Can you
Yep. Yep.
believe it?
Yep.
And
Yep.
now other airmen are gonna
Love
say,
it.
other people on your team, "Hey, I've got an idea. Let me try that."
That's what
And it
happens.
really creates this virtuous cycle
It
that
does.
allows you to tap in to all of these good ideas that are all around you. And, we started this conversation, Peter, talking about how you're not the expert in the room
Yep.
when you have a meeting. Well,
Yep.
guess what? When you get into the trenches of your organization and you ask the question, Peter, that you asked of, "Hey, what can we do better? What am I doing wrong?"
Yep.
They are the experts in their corner of your organization. You're not the expert. They are
Mm.
the
Yeah.
experts. And by asking them a question,
Yep.
listening and considering it, and then acting appropriately, then now you are tapping into their expertise
Yeah.
that is a far lower level than you, but
Yeah.
far more deep in that area than
Yeah.
you ever should get.
Yeah.
Then now you're getting good ideas from every
Yeah.
corner of the organization, and the organization thrives as a result.
Yeah, I had a ton of fun doing it, and I teach leadership and command in a university through the GCMP ME, Global College of Professional Military Education, at the ACS students, and I in one of my announcements I tell them I did that to spark ideas. I said, when
Yep.
you take command, try and do this, but you know what? Like you said, just don't listen to them and blow them off and not doing anything. Actually do what they if you can, take their ideas and try and implement them. That will earn you big bucks over the long run, is
It
that you're
does.
sincerely listening to them, and like you said, it's not just a damn checklist item, and you going, "Oh, I gotta do this because the leadership book says to do this." So, yeah, brilliant.
And by
Sir,
the
let
way, you
yep,
can make it fun, Peter.
yep.
One of the things that we would do is we would have a competition. We would call it the summer of waivers or the winter of waivers, where we would get as many people energized to say, look, I'm looking for your request to waive regulations that are getting in your way.
Yep.
I want you to bombard me with your ideas. And the rules are you can submit a waiver request. No one between you and me can say no. They can recommend no, but they can't say no. And it's got to get to me within a week.
Mhm.
And now you're having fun. You're advertising the summer of waivers, and there's maybe some graphics or depictions out
Yeah, yeah,
there.
yeah,
But
yeah,
you're really telling them, no, I'm looking to do something radical to
yeah.
get rid of those barriers that are
Yes.
getting in your way. Make it fun, make it a competition, and
Yeah,
make those airmen or the members of your team looking forward to submitting the next request or recommendation
yeah.
to see if the
To see
boss will
what
follow
yep.
through.
Absolutely, I think you wrote about that in your book, correct, sir?
Yep. Yep, I did.
Um, okay, let's get back to the cat stories. So
Yeah.
I have one more cat story. I'll tell you, it's I don't know whether I'll be able to make it through the whole cat story, but I'm gonna start a would you have a cat story that you wanna share with the
Yeah,
folks?
let me go back a little bit to yours. I do actually have a couple hundred hours in the F-16.
Okay,
I was dual qualled in F-22s and
okay,
F-16s at one
nice.
point. So I know what you're talking about a little bit there. I actually, before I was a wing commander, had
Mm.
never even set foot in a cat or the
Oh,
command
wow.
post. I had never been in one.
I got a
And
story.
so I'm the commander at the President's Airfield in 2016, and now it's a fairly important responsibility to make sure
Mm,
the President's Airfield is running
sure.
properly. I remember my mission support group commander, Bill Kale, coming to me on day one on the job. And he said something like, "Hey, sir, we got a little bit of fire I need to talk to you about." And I thought he was figuratively talking about a fire,
Yeah.
but it was literally talking about a fire, actually a fire in the command post.
Oh, no.
And after it ended up being no big deal, but I did make my way there for a couple of exercises.
Uh,
And then I remember getting a call. It was March or April of 2017. I had been in the job for about 9 or 10 months about an F-16 crash off base that
hmm,
had launched from the base, and now it's a populated area around the Joint Base Andrews in Washington, D.C. We had heard initial reports that it had crashed into a school and killed a bunch of kids. That wasn't the case.
right,
But I remember scrambling down to the cat and sitting there and realizing, though I had done exercises leading a cat, I had never been in the cat for a real world situation
right.
like this F-16
Okay.
that had an engine failure fairly shortly after takeoff and
Sure,
crashed in the middle of a neighborhood in Clinton, Maryland,
sure.
fortunately into a wooded area surrounded by
Uh,
homes.
okay,
No one got hurt, no one died, really
that's
no
good.
property damage except for some trees.
Yeah,
But I remember experiencing the same thought that you did, Peter, about how I'm not the expert in how you clean up fuel spills
sure.
or how you notify the public about this or
Yep,
any of the things that you need to know. And humbly reaching out to those experts, asking them for their recommendation, and then in real time in a crisis situation following it. The one thing that I really remember about that, though, Peter,
mm,
is the responsibility of a leader in the middle of a crisis, not just to manage the crisis,
yeah,
but to make sure you're communicating up and out to all of the people that are interested in, hey, what's
yeah,
going on there with this F-16 that crashed in Clinton,
yeah,
Maryland, or whatever the situation is. And I remember stepping out of the cat for a couple of select times and making some phone calls to share some things with the governor's office and with our congressional
mm,
delegation offices that I probably legally shouldn't have shared as early as I did, but
right.
they had a right to know. And
Yeah.
so I was forthright with them as much as I could. And I remember the next year and a half that I spent in command of that base,
Mm,
the community gave us everything that we ever wanted
Sure. Yep.
because
You
we
took
proactively
Yes.
communicated to them at a time of
Yeah.
need, and that paid big time dividends. But, the other thing that strikes me is that you will be known as a leader for how well you handle not the normal times, but
Yep.
the crisis
The
times.
crisis times.
And it
100.
is so incumbent upon us as leaders
Mhm.
to exercise and red team and tabletop and prepare
So we're
so
ready.
that when the crisis comes, because it will, that
Yeah.
you will be ready practically and emotionally
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
lead your team in the midst of a situation that could be very difficult and fortunately could have turned out a lot worse than it did on that day in Clinton,
Yeah.
Maryland. But we did things right because we had prepared. And I learned that lesson from leaders that I had had and
Yeah.
seen in action going out of their way to prepare for crises
Yep.
so they would be ready when crises come or when they happen because they always will.
Yeah, sir, that's an amazing story. I'm glad nobody got hurt. I
Yep.
think I kinda maybe remember that. I think I was overseas at the stage. You said it was 2016, you said?
Yeah, the spring of 2017.
Yeah, so I was on my last leg over at Kadena, so I was getting ready for retirement. So maybe I heard about something about that when I was over there. But yeah, I wrote an article on LinkedIn. Pressure reveals character, right?
Ah,
So
uh-huh.
as leaders, you can do everything perfectly, until a crisis happens, and then people really see the real you when the proverbial shit hits the fan, right?
Yep, it's
People
true.
know what you're made of and how you lead when pressure comes in crisis action teams or whatever it is. So I think that's a very cool story. I'm glad no one got hurt, but
Yes, yep,
and when we were saying the community turned around and helped you exponentially.
yep,
See, so my last bullet in my 12 points, like Colin Powell, well, I did steal one of his his 13 points of leadership, but in my last one is be a good human.
yeah, yep,
I I firmly believe that if you're good to people, generally they will be good back to you. And
yes.
if you pay it forward, you've heard of paying it forward and stuff like that. I just think if people can be good humans, we can accomplish so much. Because people will reciprocate that kindness. Do you agree with that?
No, I do. By the way, the other Colin Powell thought that you put in your book that I love is
I do.
something like optimism and enthusiasm is a force multiplier.
That's what I
And I
said.
think it goes a
Optimism,
little
the
bit with,
petrol of
by the
a
way,
yeah.
being a good human. But yeah, I love that quote. I use that quote, that Colin
Yep,
Powell quote a lot. But
yep.
I think people are looking for both leaders that are in similar organizations that are your peers
Mm,
and your subordinates
mm.
and your superiors. They're looking for someone who is honest, trustworthy, genuine, and authentic.
Yeah,
And I think if you're just a good human being, then that
yeah,
engenders a lot of trust.
yeah,
And trust is the catalyst that allows organizations to do far more than they could otherwise.
100%.
Yeah, and so I do think, I mean, I love Colin Powell.
Yeah,
He is a hero of mine
brilliant.
for
Yeah,
multiple reasons, but no, I
amazing.
think that's a great thought. And, going back a little bit, I wanna give a shout out to a director of operations of mine when I was a F-22 test pilot. I was a
Okay.
captain or a young major.
Yep.
Dawn Dunlop was her name. She retired as a two-star, Major General Dunlop. We're still good
Oh,
friends. And I remember going
yeah,
to an
okay.
aircrew meeting, a pilot meeting, and instead of just going through the normal briefings, she said, carrying an armful of books, we're going to spend the next hour pretending that we just had an F-22 crash. And she assigned positions and she handed out the regulations. And we
Wow.
spent the hour just talking about it. And that struck me such that when I was the DO of that same squadron several years later,
Yep,
I did the same thing.
yep.
I think it was in a December, and we had an F-22 crash and a death
Oh,
during a
wow.
test mission.
Oh,
Dave
wow.
Cooley on March 25th, 2009. The exercise that we did in the tabletop that I learned from Don Dunlap
Yep,
wasn't exactly the scenario as it played
yep.
out, but we were far more practically and emotionally
Good. Yep,
prepared
yep.
to handle that situation because we had spent an hour talking about it, thinking about it, and working through what would we do and how would
Yeah.
we respond if something like that happened.
Yeah, I mean, that's an amazing story, and sorry it actually happened in real
Yeah.
life, and there was a life lost. In fact, I'm going to tell you a story, so I'm prepared for it now of when I was in a cat. But yeah, that kind of practice is amazing, right? So, you know, nothing is ever absolutely the same in reality if you practice it, but when you practice it, you do get emotionally prepared for it, you get mentally prepared for it, and you can take action based on your experiences, based on the scenario, the exercise that you went through.
Well, and
Do you?
very quickly before you jump into your cat story,
Yes,
it
sir.
was about a 600-person organization. Obviously,
Mhm.
the loss was traumatic and catastrophic for us, but that organization ended up being probably the closest knit organization I have ever been a part of.
Yeah,
And I think a big part of that
yeah,
was because we went through a crisis together.
yeah.
We handled it well together
Yep.
because we had prepared beforehand together.
Well,
And I think that
yeah.
you can create a scenario where you respond in the right way, but also your organization in the long term thrives, but only if you have prepared properly ahead of time to work through it together and then work through it together when it actually happened.
You know, there's something about trauma or going through something with other people creates a bond that can never be broken, and I think that the trust there is amazing. So that's a really cool story. Um, do you remember? I was the MSG from 2011 to 2014. I was the MSG deputy over at Kadena, so I did a number of things. But one of my jobs as the MSG over at Kadena was to serve as the personnel rep, the A1 rep, when they stood up the cat. Forget the day of the week it was. You may remember this, but I think it was 2012, 13 time frame. Um, in fact, hold up my book for a sec. Who wrote the foreword to my book?
The former senior enlisted advisor to the chairman.
So do you know CZ?
I have never met him personally, but he's got an incredible reputation.
Oh, so CZ was the command chief at the time, and he is a PJ by trade. You know, snake eating guy, done some incredible things. We had a 33 go down. A helicopter went down, and it went into the side of a mountain. Lost SA, um, and went into the side of a mountain in bad weather in Okinawa, of all places. Not a good place for any helicopter to go down, but to do it in a foreign country is exponentially more makes things exponentially more difficult. Unfortunately, we lost the engineer on that flight, Smitty, and it was so hot that it there was actually nobody to recover. But CZ went out there to lead the search and recovery of Smitty's uh, bones. What it came down to. But I was the A1 rep, and I remember at the time I actually had to notify the squadron commander that he had to go and notify, and I'm trying to avoid eye contact with the camera, of the believed to be death of that young man. Um, and that was very difficult to do. Um, just like your F-22 that went down and you lost someone, um, it's an emotional experience. But being in that cat and being surrounded by people that I trusted, I actually is Pedro Ortiz was a squadron commander. I went over to Pedro. I said, You have to make that notification, my friend." Um, that it was believed to be, of course, hadn't done DNA testing or anything like that. So, but you know the different levels of notification. But that was a tough time. But you're right, emotional things like that bring people together.
Yep.
And the rest of the time there was absolutely fantastic at Kadena. But it was a tragic accident that happened. Um, but doing something, being able to help and talk to Pedro about it, and it was just very difficult to do. But you know, we did it, and that's another cat story. I'm sorry. I'll let you
No,
talk
no, you know
while
what?
I
I
find a
I
tissue
actually wanna
somewhere.
parlay I wanna parlay off of that, and thanks for being genuine in how
Mhm.
you felt then. In this particular case, in the death of Cools, my boss was off notifying his wife, and 3 kids, and I was then asked by him to notify our organization. And so that was my perspectives, on that day. But then going a little bit fast forward to a time when I was a group commander and my group superintendent had a massive heart attack when he was on a business trip, TDY, died before he hit the ground. And I remember having to go notify his wife and 2 kids. But here, going back to the idea of being a good human and all rules are made to be waived.
Yeah.
I remember the A1 representative when they were telling me, here's how you notify, because I had never done a notification
Sure.
before.
Yep.
Very difficult time. And I asked the question because my wife and I were really good friends with my command chief, my superintendent, and his wife.
Hmm.
And I said, can my wife join me in the
Hmm.
notification?
Yeah.
And I remember this A1 rep said something like, it's against the rules. No. And I said, got it. Sorry. The good human being thing to
Yeah.
do is for her to be there with me. And she was. And
Yep.
Karen Hubbard says now, still, the widow, that it meant the world to her that it was us together that was there on that January day in 2014 to notify her because we had an established relationship. We
Yeah.
had prepared in the sense of building a community in our organization that was real and genuine. And the fact that my wife was there, maybe against the rules or not, who cares? It was the right human
It was
being
the
thing
right
to
thing to
do.
do.
And that
That's
made
right.
all the difference.
Yep, 100%. I remember we actually sent an extra person and their wife to the notification, right? So it
Yeah.
was the actual OG group commander, got Huge Johnson, Paul Johnson. He now flies for UPS. He's a great dude, Dodgers fan. He's a go Dodgers. Okay, he actually took his wife too for that specific purpose too. But yeah, I didn't tell him it was illegal. I didn't even know he was going. But to your point, sir, they did the right thing.
Yep.
And sometimes you have to do the right thing because obviously this is going to sound stupid from a PE major because it's the right thing to do, right?
Yeah.
So speaking of the right thing to do, so when I was the MSG deputy over at Kadena, during that time, I got to run a Kadena disciplinary action program. So you've been stationed overseas. I read your bio. So when you were in England, for example, if your kids did something stupid, they went and saw someone on base. They didn't go and see the cops downtown because we're protected by something called a SOFA over there, right? So I ran the Kadena disciplinary action program, and this is all going back to doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do. And I used to sit across the table. These kids would do stupid stuff, and some adult dependents would do stupid stuff too. And I didn't waste my time with them because they were adults. But with the kids, I spent more time with, sir. And I would ask them, who's the only person that you need to listen to? And they would sit there and they're surrounded by their mom and their dad, and sometimes it was a Marine dad, and and they would go, "My mom, my dad," and I said, "No, neither of them." And the parents would go, "What are you talking about? What are you about to tell my kid?" And I said, you should listen to your gut." I
Yeah.
said, "Because your gut will likely not lead you in the wrong direction." I had to clarify that a couple times. I said, "There are some bad people who have bad guts out there who
Yep.
just do stupid stuff because they ignore their gut. But if you got that little guy on your shoulder that says, 'Dude, probably not a good idea,' that's your gut, right? That's doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do. Listening to that dude that's on your shoulder. I mean, do you have anything you can share about that? You got to go with your gut, sir. That's what
Yeah,
I
and I especially believe that to be true, Peter,
Mm.
for people that have risen into a leadership position. They've accumulated experience, that they have intuition and judgment that they may not even be able to articulate about what they know to be right and what they
Right.
know to be wrong.
Yep.
And it's best to be very cautious if you're ever going to go against that because that has been earned over time and
Yeah.
accumulates over time. And there's a quote, one of my heroes is Chuck Yeager, the famous test pilot. I'm still really
Sure.
good friends with his widow, Victoria. We speak on the circuit a little bit together. And one of his quotes is, rules are made for those that are too stupid to make up their own. But then there's a ... but you better be right. And the idea that, you know what, I got
Wow.
it. I'm willing to take the heat
Powerful.
for bringing my wife to the notification. I don't care. I'm willing to take the heat because I know that it's right. And so I'm not saying go out there and
It's
break the
amazing.
rules to anybody that's listening,
Yeah.
but if you know that there is something that is right, especially in a time-limited, real-time situation,
Yeah.
then follow your gut, do what's right, acknowledge in the aftermath or the after action that you realize you were probably breaking a rule or regulation, but here's why you did it in this time critical situation, because you knew that it was the right human
Right.
being thing to do, and you were trusting your gut that had been earned by accumulated experience.
Couldn't have put that in better. That was amazing. And you're right. You have to listen to your gut, and yeah, I like it better when you said, "You better be right."
You better be right,
And nine
because there's
times,
accountability
yeah,
when you violate a rule or a regulation.
correct, correct.
But guess what?
Yep.
If you know the right thing to do, first of all, get a waiver if you have the time to get a waiver. But if you don't in a time critical situation like that, then man, follow that gut
Yeah.
and then accept the consequences.
Yeah, and yeah, and like I said, 99% of the time, the gut won't lead you
Yep.
wrong. It won't
Yeah.
lead you wrong. You'll get you'll get an icky feeling like, something's not going well here. So,
Yes.
I love that. Sir, I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation today. I think we've covered some topics that are deep. Obviously, the cat stories were cool. I appreciate, I'm super thankful for Lurch Afflerball, and him inviting me to his retirement ceremony. And that's where I first heard you talk, and I was like, "Who is this dude?" And when I started my own business, um, Lurch actually said, "You probably need to talk to Dragon." So I got a last story. You know my call sign, right? We're gonna swap call sign stories quick. 30
Yep.
seconds. How did you earn Dragon, sir? Come on.
Yep. So in my fighter pilot world, they gave a name that sounded cool, but was based on something stupid you did. My call sign is Dragon. I got it in 1998. And the only thing I tell people, Lurch probably knows the whole story, but you're not going to share it on this podcast.
I
The
will
only thing
not.
I tell people is it has to do with Zaragoza, Spain, and nuclear weapons. And I'll
Okay.
leave it at that. In
Oh
fact,
my God.
my wife for Christmas in 1998 got me a big pub sign. We lived in England at the time. I'm staring at it right now.
Yeah.
Established 1998.
Yeah.
Dragon's Lair is the name of my pub. And it's
I've
sitting
seen
there in
that.
my office. Yep.
That's
Dragon's Lair.
awesome.
Yes.
Wow.
So it's a full-size pub sign. But yeah, I've been Dragon since 1998. It's a cool sounding name, but the story is sketchy.
You are absolutely right. I'm not a fighter pilot. I was assigned to the 67th Fighting Cox, the F-15 squadron over at Kadena. When I first got there, I was a section commander. We went to Korea. We had a night out, and they wanted to name me, right? So, and I grew up in Australia, so they wanted to tease me about my accent and call me some dumb name like kangaroo or koala or something like that, something stupid. And then this drunk guy got up. It's always a drunk guy who ends up naming you, right? I remember the story. He got up and he goes, "Let's name him Lamont." And I'm sitting there, sir. I've been in the States of all of 12 years. I moved when I was like 87. So this was in like 98, 99 time period. And I'm like, who the hell is Lamont? I said it under my breath, right? And so he tells the story. And when I became the section commander, I walked into Cheese Grater. I don't know if you know him. He was a hero in the F-15C world. He shot down 2 MiGs on the first night of the Gulf War. Anyway, super cool guy. First thing he said when he saw me, "Hey, good to have you. You're going to help me to have to lead." It was when maintenance squadrons were used to be combined. He said, "You're going to have to lead, help me lead these people. I don't know anything about leadership for enlisted people." And I'm like, "Sir, I'm a first lieutenant." And you know what I said? "Shirt, first sergeant, come in here." And I said, "You need to ask him that question, not me, because I've been in the Air Force all the 3 years." Anyway, he met me and he said, "Hey, Pete, I know your office has old furniture in it. Feel free to take other furniture. You know where this is going. There's a smile on your face, right?" But I had no idea, right? So I said, "Okay, sir." So I used to take furniture from other offices, leave them outside my office, and then change them out. So basically, I stole furniture. Basically,
Hmm.
I pillaged furniture. There you go. That's my PE major coming out. So I pillaged furniture from other offices. So he tells the story, and I guess there was a show back in the '60s called Sanford and Son, and the guy named Lamont Sanford was a hauler of furniture. So they named me Lamont Sanford.
Uh-huh.
And it was such a wasted call sign, sir, because Cheese Grater, my boss, he said, "That's a great call sign." And I'm like, "Sir, who is Lamont Sanford?" He goes, "Oh my God." So he was the one that had to tell me the story and then forced me to watch old episodes of Sanford and Son, so I knew who Lamont Sanford was. So anyway, that's how I got my nickname. Probably not as mischievous as your story or crazy as your story, but we'll leave that for another day.
Lamont, I just want to say thanks to you, Peter/Lamont. Thanks to the listeners and viewers. If there's ever anything that I can do for you all, track me down, johnteichert.com, reach out. I would love to help you in any way.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a phenomenal human being, ladies and gentlemen, so please reach out to him. Thanks for tuning in to Unbreakable Leadership. If you found value in today's episode, be sure to follow and share it with a fellow leader. Remember, leadership is about action, growth, and staying true to who you are. I'll catch you next time for more real-world lessons. Until then, keep leading well. Strength and honor.